All right, Nick, let's talk about the USC Trojans this season. Literally can taste it. It is so close. Football is back, and the Trojans are looking really, really good this year. But there's a couple question marks, and we've got some news here. Clear up a lot of questions. Really great news for the Trojans, especially at one key position on the offense. I think this should be great news for them going forward. But before we get into all that, I'm Andrew. That's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, the Trojans got some really great news on the offensive side of the ball, specifically at the wide receiver position. There's a lot of question marks on that side of the ball from people leaving, from people being injured. But one guy in particular, major contributor from last year, is looking like he is 100% ready to go. You love to hear that for the beginning of the season. Let's get into the article and we'll break down some interesting data on the other side. So this first article is over on 3 Sports. It says, back in May, Jacobe Lane suffered a broken foot and has been recovering since then, looking to get ready for week 1. Now, in a new injury report, Lincoln Riley shared the good news that Lane is full go and back from the foot injury. He says Jacobe is a full go now, Lincoln Riley said. He's been a full go for the last 4 or 5 days. Probably it was kind of built up from there. He had a broken foot in May, so that had to heal. He had healed from that, but has been doing well and progressed even a little bit ahead of schedule. Love to hear that. He's been a full go here for about a week, so getting back into shape, getting him kind of back into the fold after missing some of that time, Riley said. But you can see some of the rust starting to get knocked off. So I think this is crucial. I think it's going to be big for the Trojans. This guy back on track. He's a full go. It looks like he's already getting back to form as well. And they really, really need this guy back to form because USC really good at scoring touchdowns through the wide receiver position last year. If we look at our first graph here, just showing some of the top teams in the country and where they were as far as scoring touchdowns, you can see Miami on the left had 41, Texas 40, Ohio State 37, 30 with Oregon. USC right in the middle in the mix of these top teams, 29 receiving touchdowns for them. Notre Dame 24, 21 South Carolina, 18 Florida, 17 Alabama. But nonetheless, USC really good in the mix with some of these top teams as far as receiving touchdowns last season. And if we look at their depth chart and just their stats from ESPN showing who did what last year, it shows you how much importance Jacobe Lane has in this offense. While he was number 2 in yards, he was number 1 by a mile when it came to touchdowns. This guy got 12 touchdowns last year, almost like 50% of the touchdowns that the Trojans had through the wide receiver position. And if you look at this top 5 receivers on the Trojans this year, Mekhi Lemon, leader in yards, Jacobe Lane, leader in touchdowns, and the next 3 guys actually left in the transfer portal. So there's a lot of question marks on this depth chart as far as the wide receiver position. So it's crucial that both Lemon and Lane get back on the field and they could rely on these guys for the season going forward. It looks like Jacobe Lane back in the fold, going to be a touchdown monster again this year. It looks like he's knocking the rust off, getting back to form, ready for week 1. And that is very important just because the sheer gravity of losing 3 of your top 5 receivers to the transfer portal, having a lot of question marks there, a little bit of uncertainty. Great to have a guy you're comfortable with back there for the season. So I think this is really good news for the Trojans. This guy is back to 100% per Lincoln Riley. Really, really loving that for them. But enough for me, Nick. I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this for the Trojans before we get to you, Trojans fans, in the comment section below. Talking, wide receiver position. We're talking about guys at the wide receiver position, not maybe, uh, fast guys. Not there's a ton of different kind of receivers, but let's talk red zone threats. Who's your favorite guy that when you hit the red zone, it even could be a tight end. I'll allow that as well. Who's the guy that you always love to look for in the red zone on big plays that caught all the touchdowns? Let us know your favorite red zone threat in Trojans history in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, enough from me. What are your thoughts on everything here for the Trojans?
Look, it's obviously a good sign you get a player of that caliber getting healthy again, of course, right? So just at a high level, it's a good news, right? Of course, anytime you get healthier, you're better. But I think this is more important than a lot of people realize because this is a USC team that really, I think, to be totally honest, this is a make or break year for Lincoln Riley. If he goes 7-6 again, I think he's probably done. They may give him 1 year of leeway, but I kind of doubt it. They're expecting a step forward, which means they got to be in rhythm when it comes time to that middle of season gauntlet 3 game performance when they go to Illinois, home against Michigan, and then to Notre Dame, and then to Nebraska. That's a sneaky tough game. That 4 game stretch right there, that's going to go a long way in deciding the USC Trojans' future and Lincoln Riley's future. I say all that to really highlight that it's been a good offseason for USC. We've talked about that a bunch. Good hires, Bowden, coaching staff, recruits, transfers. They've done a good job. Now it's time to execute, right? We're getting close to the regular season. All of the storylines of the offseason, great recruiting wins, great strategic changes, tactical moves here and there. That's all really important and that's all well and good, but now's where it has to matter. Now's where it has to count. And you've got to get everybody on the same page early. Everyone has to be working in the right direction week one. And I know they start with what? Missouri State, then Georgia Southern and Purdue, and then Michigan State, right? They got to be 4-0 and they got to be 4-0 in convincing fashion. They got to get on the same page. They got to be in rhythm. Now is not the time to kind of get off to a lackluster start. Having your best playmakers on deck, like we're seeing here with this report, is a great sign because we need to be rolling and just on all cylinders here once we get to that middle of the season stretch, right? Because if there's any hesitancy, if there's any issues at all, if they have a couple down days offensively, or if they lose one of those games, God forbid, the wheels could fall off, I think, a lot quicker than a lot of us really would want to happen over at USC. I don't think they will. I think USC is going to surprise a lot of people. I think they're going to be a top 20 team, top 15 team. They may even be in some playoff conversations. That's how much I trust Lincoln Riley. That's how much I trust really the offseason the Trojans have had that we've covered so much. But I really think they got to get off to a hot start to build that confidence back in themselves. Because one of the things for us outsiders is that we get caught up in the mystique. Well, it's USC, right? I mean, they've been good for decades, right? It's one of the blue bloods in college football. But if you're on that football team, right, if you're 19 years old and 20 years old, right, you've been seriously watching football for maybe 8 years, right? We're talking Lane Kiffin's final year at USC may have been the first time you watched the Trojans, right? Maybe. I mean, you may have only known the Clay Helton era if you were a player now watching the Trojans back then. So you don't know much about Mystique, right? You've heard of Reggie Bush. You've heard of Carson Palmer. You've heard of, obviously, the great, the games in the 60s and 70s. You've heard of McKay. You've heard of all of that, of course. But the question is, does that have any effect on you? It doesn't, right? The Mystique isn't there. You got to build it back yourself. That's what Nick Saban had to do at Alabama. That's what Steve Sarkisian has had to do at Texas. And that's what Jim Harbaugh had to do at Michigan. Those are blue blood programs that have rebuilt themselves, or Alabama's case, turned into a dynasty. But it took a little bit of mojo from the coach to get the mystique believing in the players again. First step, you got to recruit well and bring in good players. USC has done that. Now they got to go out and execute. Now they got to go out and beat Missouri State by 50. Run up the score. I hate to say that, but you got to do it. You got to put up a lot of points on the board. Beat these teams 60-10. Beat Georgia Southern 56-3. Wax Purdue, wax Michigan State. You got to feel the mystique coming. You got to feel like it's 2005 again. For a lot of these kids, this is going to be their first chance to see USC as a real threat and a real powerhouse. So you got to get everybody healthy that can play and get everyone rolling on the same page. That is absolutely critical for the Trojans. Because again, that 4-game stretch, I'm going to highlight it again just because I think it's so important. At Illinois, home against Michigan, at Notre Dame, and at Nebraska. Those 4 games right there. If you win 3 of those 4 games, you're in a good spot. But there's a real world scenario here where it could go south real quick. Those are 4 losable games by any program, not just USC, but there's a lot of programs that would be a tough stretch for. You lose a good chunk of those games, you're in trouble. Lincoln Riley is in trouble, and then you have to start this whole process all over again. Don't want to go that route. We've done that before. Kiffin, Sarkisian, Helton, now Lincoln Riley, right? We don't want to keep recycling and really just trying to recreate and find a new solution here. Getting off to a strong start is important for USC this season, more than any other year, frankly, to be totally honest. A lot of times when we talk about on this channel, the beginning few weeks of the season really aren't that important if you don't have to play a tough opponent, right? You're just trying to figure out who certain starters are, almost like the NFL preseason in some regards. Don't want to lose the game, of course, but you want to figure out some things, maybe some depth pieces, maybe a position battle here or there. Really not too important in terms of overall performance, right? For example, Oregon almost lost to Boise State last year, and they ended up undefeated until they lost to Ohio State in the playoff. That's how most of the time it is for these big blue bloods early in the season against inferior opponents. Not this year with USC here with Southern California. They need to get off to a hot start. They need receivers, quarterback, defense across the board on the same page, rocking and rolling and dominating from snap one. I cannot stress that enough. They need all that confidence, all that mystique. when they go into that gauntlet. If they can go into that stretch, starting with the Illinois game with some confidence, with some energy, with some buzz, they're a very real threat. And I think Lincoln Riley understands that. There's been a sense of urgency in fall practice, even as we are into game planning week right now, ready for week one. There is a sense of urgency that we're not seeing from other teams that have lighter schedules to start the season. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to see it. And hopefully for USC Trojans fans, you guys watching this, that they get off to a hot start. Because if they get off to a hot start and we see this receivers and everyone coming together, people healthy, rocking and rolling, things will be really good for USC. So I think the trend right now is good, right? Getting healthy is the first step. The best ability is availability. Now you got to turn that availability into performance. We'll have to see how they do this weekend, but I think right now they're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, Nick, and I think the key point you bring up is fast start, good middle, and strong finish. I think that's how the season's got to go. So like you said, they have the opportunity to really get this offense clicking. I know they say, he's a full go. He's knocking off some of the rust, especially when we're talking about Jacobe Lane. But it's like you said, they have the prime schedule to really get this offense rolling early on. They've got to do it because, like you said, middle of the season, very tough for any team. Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska, going to be tough. Northwestern, Iowa, they're not going to be easy, but they're not going to be quite as tough. Then you look at the end of the season, you ended off with Oregon and then UCLA, whoever with Nico Yamaleva at the quarterback position there. Who knows how good UCLA could or could not be. I think there's a little, intrigue there as well. So it's going to be crucial they get off going really early because this is a team that's going to have some battles down the stretch. Like you said, you want to be, playoff contenders. You want to be at least really big bowl game contenders. Lincoln Riley has got to prove his stuff. And you got to get off to a quick start because these games through this season, you really have to have this offense clicking and come in and go up against a team like Michigan, young quarterback, kind of a style that likes to smother out the opposition a little bit in the past years. You got to be able to score the points, have your team running at 100% to get out to a lead that hopefully they can't come back to. Notre Dame, kind of the same way. They have tons of depth, tons of good defense, want to slow you down. And then you got some offensive battles at the end of the year. You got to be ready to try to outgun Oregon. You got to be ready for a quarterback battle versus UCLA. I think this is really crucial, and I think this is boding well for the Trojans, saying, hey, we know what we need to do. I think the key words that Lincoln Riley said, hey, he's a full go. He's 100%. He left no question. He said, all right, this guy's out there. He's 100% ready for the season. He's going to be a big contributor, big part of this offense. He didn't say, well, you never know. We're going to see how it goes. Take it day by day. He said, no, I understand the gravity of the situation. We're going out there, best foot forward, get our best guys on the field. So I think this is a great decision by Lincoln Riley, and I'm really excited to watch week one. I expect, like you said, an offensive, absolute shootout just from the USC side of the ball as far as they're scoring tons of points against these lower caliber teams the first few games of the season.